you talk about going where you're treated best. Do you and did you apply the same mentality when it came to dating?
And I think there's a lot of men who are very angry. And I'm not saying I can't see their point on some of it. It's hard for me to be angry when you realize there's opportunities because anger comes from powerlessness. For years, I've wanted to share with you what I believe is the truth about masculinity. Because I see a lot of people in this audience that live in Western countries where masculinity is increasingly not tolerated. Of course, there are certain things that men do that are unacceptable, but the idea that masculinity in itself is toxic is silly. And I never knew how to approach this topic because I read entire books, I made pages of notes, and I wrote down, 21-year-old boys in the UK are struggling with math and they're not getting a job. I just said to myself, I don't know how this fits. But I recently had a conversation with Cristina Cataman on her show, and we talked about this issue. She's an influencer on social media, but she's a very smart person. She came from Moldova in Eastern Europe, and she retains a lot of the good parts of that culture. She moved to North America, and she talks on her channel about the struggles sometimes of understanding the North American, the Western way of approaching certain relationships. And we talked about how I've actually found it more comfortable being in relationships in the kind of places that she's from. And it really opened my eyes because I've wanted to tell you for so long about all the places I go where men listen to the music that they want, even if it seems a little girly. Men wear scarves or they wear pink or they would do a lot of things that where I grew up and maybe where you grew up is kind of frowned upon. People make fun of you. And they're the most manly guys ever. You go to Montenegro, you get big, beefy guys wearing a pink polo shirt and listening to Montenegrin Selena on the radio. And no one thinks they're any less manly for that. And so I want to share with you this interview segment with Cristina Cataman, and you can hear exactly how masculinity is different around the world. If you have sons that are growing up, this is something that they're going to want to hear. If you are struggling yourself to understand where you fit in the world, this is for you. And it explains, I believe, a lot of the social side of why I decided to leave the United States.
I want to, ask you about obviously the subject that pretty much all of my listeners and followers really love it when I talk about, which is, you talk about going where you're treated best. Do you and did you apply the same mentality when it came to dating? Is there a place where, as a guy, for example, or even as a girl, you could go somewhere and you'll be treated better than in another place?
Yeah, I think so. What was interesting is, growing up in the United States, how I tried to set myself apart at 15 or 16 years old was I got an interest in some level of fashion. I tried to dress better than other. I remember I had a policy in high school, like I don't wear jeans to high school. Like that's not for me. Like, and I would iron my pants, and that wasn't like a cool thing
You
in the
sound like
U.S. Like
somebody who grew up in the former Soviet Union, actually. We weren't
well, it
allowed
ended
to
up
wear
work.
jeans.
It ended up working out very well for me. Listen, but I look around today, man, the way some people dress, I like to be a bit more polished. So, yeah, I entrepreneurship is more cool now than when I was, 21 years old, and my friends were dragging me to bars, and people thought it was kind of weird. But yeah, I think that for me, you should absolutely apply that. But my point was, growing up, I would wear like a scarf. People would throw like slurs at you because you wore a scarf. Like people would drive by you on the road and shout out their cars like different slurs because you were wearing a scarf or because you wore like a certain kind of shoes or something. It's like, wearing a scarf doesn't tell you about anybody. And so, for me, and that's anecdotal, but I felt like, yeah, I learned a lot about masculinity, and I have a home in Montenegro. You mentioned, ex-Yugoslavia. You'll go to Montenegro, and you'll see guys, the burliest, buffest guys, driving like these cute little cars, and they're listening to like whatever the Montenegrin version of Selena is, and like they're not worried about it, and no one thinks they're any less manly, and it's just like a real test of masculinity. And I've met women all throughout. We have a lot of people who work for us in Eastern Europe, and married someone from Eastern Europe, and um, it's like, yeah, you know what manly is? Manly is you face adversity in your life and you don't give up and you don't run away from it and you're committed and you know, have a cause that matters to you and, you know, you don't just sit around. And I guess that, like, if you don't need providing for, or if you don't need, uh, like, if that's just like, if the government just gives you stuff in the West, like, yeah, you don't really value people who work hard as much. I'm not saying that nobody in the West works hard, um, but yes, for sure, that culture was different. I mean, I've met people from all around the world, and there's different, you know, obviously people are individuals, but I mean, culturally speaking, there's different things about each culture that are interesting. I've had people come up to me and say, hey, you know, I moved to Colombia because of you, and I met the love of my life. I never would have thought I would have met someone who would kind of identify with me. Um, so, I mean, there's pros and cons perhaps about each different culture. Coming from a smaller family, I'm not sure if the, you know, the Latin America thing where everyone's getting together and the kind of the stereotypical. I have friends married to Latinas, and every weekend it's you know, it's Tia Guadalupe's barbecue, and there's 30 people, and it's like I need more me time than that. But yeah, I think people should do that. I'm not saying go just to kind of be a person who takes advantage. Um, but I think that having relationships that are based on more shared values and being who you are, yeah, of course it's a lot easier when you consider the world rather than just where you're from.
So you don't strike me as somebody who would actually ever split bills with a woman on dates.
I don't think I'm a bill splitter. Maybe when I was 20. No, I don't think so. I don't think so. I think that here's the challenge for me. I look at the US, and I've seen it this way for some time, but I think it's getting worse on the political front. People are at each other's throats. Obviously, again, men are men, women are women to some extent everywhere. But I feel like there's more of a like a culture in the West where like dating is war. And it's not even just the West. I remember many years ago, I was out, might have been some business function we had, and it wrapped up, and we were like at a beach bar. And it's me, and it's a friend of mine, and it's two guys who are working with us. And we met these four German girls, and they were just like super chill about everything. And my friend's like, oh my goodness, like where I'm from, like if these two girls wanted to go with these two, like they would try and stop them and like no, like you know if we're not gonna you know go out with someone tonight, like you can't. So like even in Germany, it was like just more chill. Um, I think there's something like North America, maybe I don't know Australia, I don't know maybe as well, maybe the English speaking world, where it's like a war. It's like everyone's trying to beat the other side that I just don't think exists everywhere else. Obviously, men have frustrations about women, and women think men don't get it, like everywhere. But there's something where, and now it's political too. Like if you're a Trump person, the other side are evil. If you're a Biden person, the MAGA people are evil. Like they should be kicked out of the country. It's people are just at each other's throats. And so, to your question about splitting the bill, I feel like, you know, I don't know that I ever did that, but I think it was always like you always felt I always felt kind of stupid maybe because like there was all these other guys being like, why aren't you trying, like why are you letting her take advantage of you? And I never really identified with that. And so you go to, you know, where you're from, or you know, anywhere like that, and it just seems much more straightforward. Um, where it's like, yeah, like this is what you're expected to do, and this is what I'm expected to do, and yeah, I don't think I'd like to be a person who splits bills. Is the short answer to your question.
Great, my audience will love you. No, I'm just kidding. No, but it's very interesting because you're right. Like you know, there's no confusion about that. And I've said this on numerous occasions. I'm not criticizing necessarily the Western world because there are things about the Western world that I love. There's a reason why you know I moved to Canada, but we kind of in the Slavic Eastern European world, I've always said this, it seems to me like we figured out this whole equality of opportunity between men and women without totally destroying gender roles. There's still a lot of value in, you know, motherhood. There's still a lot of value in being a man and providing without you know necessarily blending too much the masculinity and femininity. And here in you know Canada and in the Western world, I guess, yeah, in the English speaking world, I don't know how it is in Western Europe. I've heard conflicting views on that, but it's almost like cultures of extremes. There's no like if it's going to the right, it's going all the way to the right and then to an extreme. You know, even my husband and I always laugh about this. Even the workout culture in North America, it's very extreme. You know, you're gonna lift heavy weights and, take all sorts of supplements. In a lot of the European world, it's not like that. It's not that extreme. It's just like, hey, live a healthy lifestyle, integrate, movement into your life. And there isn't that many extremes, if that makes sense. Do you find that as well?
Yeah, well, I remember when I was young and I wanted to go out with some girl, I'm like, oh, I got her flowers. It's like, you're a creep. I mean, if you go to Russia, if you go to parts of Eastern Europe and you don't bring flowers, you're a creep. Like, what's wrong with you?
That's gonna be the last
What-
time you see her. Yes.
Right. This is, some of us are born in the wrong place. Um, and yet, we've had a lot of people working for us. I mean, I think that the kind of work we do, we've found some really amazing, women over the years who've worked for us in places like in Belgrade and Georgia and all points in between. And people are like, oh, like it's just like, you have these soft women. Some of these women are tough as nails, but they want you to bring them flowers, in their, what you'll overhear, about their own relationships. And so there are certain roles. I think there's a certain, equality of opportunity. There's opportunities for people. It's not, I mean, people in Serbia have children and they have actually pretty generous, time off to take care of those, children when they're born. But then it's, back to work. And I don't think anyone's like, I don't want to work. I'm sure there are some people who do that. But I think people have this really, I just think the simplest way is there's a screwed up view of masculinity and femininity in the Western world. And I think there's a lot of men who are very angry. And I'm not saying I can't see their point on some of it. It's hard for me to be angry when you realize there's opportunities because anger comes from powerlessness. Listen, some of those guys should just improve themselves and be better. And maybe there's a powerlessness that there's just not enough opportunity in general in some of these countries. And I get that also. I think that can also be solved by have a business that's online, find something you can do from anywhere, and then go somewhere where you feel like you belong more. And you won't be angry. Like, let's not spend our entire lives complaining about people, complaining about dating, complaining about women. Like, let's do something about it. I just think there's so much anger in the Western world that, yeah, it's perhaps because there have been these extremes. I mean, I get the comments like, I can't be masculine because I don't lift to their, to their opinion, I don't lift. And again, like what is masculinity really in this traditional sense people think about it? I don't know that it's about going to the gym because you'll go to like, Serbia and they'll be like, oh, these guys, all they do is go to the gym and lift all day. They're dumb. They don't contribute. They make me do all the work around the house and have the job. All this guy does is talk to his bros at the gym. And it's like, oh, like you have a business, like you keep pushing, like no matter what happens, you keep getting back up. Like that's masculine. So I think it's this very warped view of masculinity in the West.
Yeah, absolutely. I think people are very confused here, for sure.
Women that I've, dated over the years, like, I mean, from Poland and it's all the different places, Central and Eastern Europe, they're like someone your age in the US where they would know nothing. They just would have no life experience. There's a great maturity, which is very interesting to me. And again, there's just a levity. And then there's a restaurant in Belgrade. You go and they have the ladies portion. It's like half the food for 65% of the price or something, and people don't get upset about it, And it's the guys. It's like, listen, the women are always right, so your bathroom's to the left. It just feels like a little bit more lightweight, and not everybody's offended.
Right. Right. The offended part is it's people men open doors for women, right? We actually were laughing. We were just meeting up here with my friends she's from Russia and her husband is from Estonia, and when we said goodbye to one another, we were together, four of us, my husband and I, and them two. We said goodbye to one another, and both of them opened doors for us, like into the vehicles. And they both laughed and they were like, listen, we're probably the only guys in Miami who are doing this right now, because it's just not the norm here. But it's interesting, I do find, and more so in Canada than US. I think in US people are a little bit more blunt, at least right now I'm in Florida, so maybe I have a little bit of a skewed idea. The rest of the country, obviously every state is different, but in Canada there's definitely this level of, just offensiveness to everything. People are so easily offended, and it's just like, come on, it's not so serious. I remember a friend of mine posted a picture she took in a parking lot in Dubai, and there was like ladies only parking spots so that women don't have to walk too far to go to the grocery store. And I was like, damn, like that. I wish we had that in Canada, because that's just because how dare you, like what, I can't walk myself to the grocery store. It's very
The women
interesting.
are offended. It's hard to keep up with who would be offended by what, but yeah. I remember there were like IKEA back in the day had pregnant parking. I remember men like 15 years ago complaining about that in the U.S. Like, why should we have to park further away, kind of thing. It's a lot of, and I'm not saying there aren't. Again, there are probably some reasons why people are frustrated. To me, there's a geographical solution to every problem. And again, I mean, maybe what you're saying, you make some good points. Were we all really born where we were supposed to be born, or at least where we fit in? So go there.